Who were the Hùng Kings? Myth, history, and the birth of Vietnam. If you have listened to some of the folk tales and legends on this channel, you may have noticed that many of them take place during the time of the Hùng Kings. The stories of Saint Gióng, bánh chưng and bánh, the watermelon, and many others are all traditionally set in this distant age. And if some of those stories are new to you, you can also find them here on the channel. That legendary age is usually known as the Hồng Bàng period. When Vietnamese people speak about the beginning of their country, they often begin with the Hùng Kings. According to tradition, the Hùng Kings founded Văn Lang, the first kingdom of the Vietnamese people. They belonged to the Hồng Bàng dynasty. Tradition speaks of 18 generations of Hùng Kings, and their story began almost 5,000 years ago. But how much of that is history? Were the Hùng Kings real rulers? Was Văn Lang a real kingdom? And what exactly does Hồng Bàng mean? Well, the honest answer is a little complicated. The story contains myth, cultural memory, and probably fragments of a real ancient society. But those three things are not quite the same. Let us begin with the story preserved in Vietnamese tradition. Long ago, there was a legendary ruler named Dê Minh, who was said to be a descendant of Tan Nong, the divine farmer of ancient mythology. While traveling through the lands south of the Five Ranges, Dê Minh had a son named Loc Tuc. He appointed Loc Tuc to rule the lands of the south. Loc Tuc took the title Kin Dong Vong, and the kingdom he ruled was called Sich Quy. Pause. According to traditional chronology, Kin Dong Vong began his reign in 2879 BCE. He married Tan Long, the daughter of the lord of Lake Dong Jin. Their son was named Sung Lam. When Sung Lam succeeded his father, he became known as Lac Long Quan, the dragon lord of Lac. Lac Long Quan later married U Co, a mountain fairy. U Co gave birth not to an ordinary child, but to a sack containing 100 eggs. From those eggs came 100 sons. Pause. Because Lac Long Quan belonged to the world of the sea, while U Co belonged to the mountains, they eventually separated. 50 sons followed their father towards the coast. The other 50 followed their mother into the highlands. The eldest son became the first Hùng King. He founded a kingdom called Văn Lang and established his capital at Pong Chau, in the region associated today with Phu Tho province. His descendants continued to rule under the shared title Hùng Vuong, or Hùng King. That ruling line became known as the Hồng Bàng dynasty. According to traditional chronology, this ancient age began with Kin Dong Vong in 2879 BCE and lasted until the 3rd century BCE. Pause. Now, already there are reasons to be cautious. If 18 kings, or even 18 generations of kings, ruled from the traditional date of 2879 BCE until around 258 BCE, their combined reign would cover more than 2,500 years. That would mean an average of roughly 140 years for each king. Clearly, this cannot be read as a normal list of 18 individual human rulers. So when Vietnamese tradition speaks of the 18 Hùng Kings, it probably does not mean only 18 people. It may refer to 18 royal lines, 18 branches, or simply a sacred number representing a long ancestral age. The traditional account is not a modern administrative record. It is an origin story. What was Văn Lang? In the traditional narrative, Văn Lang was the kingdom ruled by the Hùng Kings. Its people were called the Lac Viet. The king stood at the top. Below him were officials traditionally called the Lac Hau and Lac Tuong. Local communities were said to be governed by hereditary leaders. The people cultivated wet rice, lived around major rivers, practiced fishing, produced bronze objects, and maintained strong rituals connected to ancestors and nature. Now, some of this sounds legendary, but some of it also sounds quite plausible for an early society in the Red River region. The difficulty is that we do not possess government documents written by the rulers of Văn Lang. There are no surviving royal decrees saying, I am the fifth Hùng King, ruler of Văn Lang, and this is the 23rd year of my reign. In fact, the familiar stories were written down much later. Important versions appeared in medieval Vietnamese texts, many centuries after the period they described. That does not make the stories meaningless, but it does mean that historians cannot treat every detail as eyewitness evidence. What does Hồng Bàng mean? Hồng Bàng is the traditional name of the dynasty associated with the Hùng Kings. You may therefore hear expressions such as the Hồng Bàng period, the Hồng Bàng dynasty, or the Hồng Bàng clan. But the term belongs mainly to Vietnam's mythic and genealogical tradition, linking the Hùng Kings to a much larger family tree of legendary ancestors. So, was Hồng Bàng a dynasty in the same sense as the Lý, Tran, or Nguyen dynasties? Probably not. For the later dynasties, historians have inscriptions, court records, named rulers, diplomatic documents, buildings, and dates that can be compared across multiple sources. For Hồng Bàng, we mainly have later textual traditions, legends, rituals, and attempts to connect them with archaeological evidence. It is therefore better understood as a legendary founding dynasty than as a fully documented royal house. What does archaeology tell us? Here the story becomes more concrete. Archaeologists have found abundant evidence that complex societies existed in northern Vietnam during the Bronze and early Iron Ages. The best-known archaeological culture is the Gióng culture. Gióng communities produced highly sophisticated bronze objects, especially the great bronze drums now recognized around the world. They cultivated rice, they built settlements near rivers, they used boats, they made weapons, tools, ornaments, and ceremonial objects. Their art depicted warriors, musicians, dancers, houses, birds, boats, and communal rituals. These were not imaginary people. The settlements and objects they left behind are real. You can see their bronze drums in museums today. Earlier archaeological cultures, including Pung Nguyen, Gióng Giao, and Gomun, also show a long process of social and technological development in the region before the height of Gióng. This suggests that by the first millennium BCE, parts of northern Vietnam contained organized, unequal, and increasingly complex communities. There were skilled metal workers, there were regional leaders, there were trade networks, and there may have been political structures more complex than those of a single village. So, it is entirely reasonable to think that some kind of early polity existed in the Red River Basin. What archaeology cannot currently prove is that its rulers used the title Hùng Vuong, or that the state officially called itself Văn Lang. The society revealed by archaeology is real. Its exact relationship to the traditional royal story remains uncertain. So, were the Hùng Kings real? This depends on what we mean by real. The dragon lords, the mountain fairy, and the 100 eggs belong to mythology. A literal reading of 18 kings ruling continuously from 2879 BCE has no reliable contemporary evidence behind it. But were there ancient leaders ruling communities in the Red River region? Very likely. Could later generations have remembered these rulers collectively as the Hùng Kings, folding memories of migrations, marriage alliances, and river communities into the legend of Lac Long Quan and Âu Co? Possibly, but it is difficult to prove. History is often less satisfying than legend. It rarely gives us a perfect yes or no. The Hùng Kings may preserve a distant cultural memory without preserving a literal record of individual rulers. Myth does not mean a lie. This point is important. When historians call the Hồng Bàng story a myth, they are not simply saying this is false and therefore worthless. A myth can tell us how a community understands itself. The story of 100 children presents the Vietnamese people as members of one extended family. The separation between mountains and sea connects different landscapes and communities. The Hùng King becomes not merely a ruler, but a shared ancestor. That is why the worship of the Hùng Kings remains culturally powerful today. Every year, people travel to the Hùng temples in Phu To to honor the ancestral kings. In 2012, UNESCO inscribed this practice on its representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Notice what UNESCO recognized, not archaeological proof that every legend happened exactly as described, but a living tradition connected to Vietnamese cultural identity. The story of the Hùng Kings was shaped by centuries of memory, religion, literature, and nation building. Văn Lang stands somewhere between archaeology and tradition. The Hùng Kings are best understood as ancestral rulers through whom Vietnamese culture remembers its earliest beginnings. They may not be historical in the same way as later Vietnamese emperors, but their cultural importance is undeniable. As symbols of shared ancestry and as part of the continuing cultural life of Vietnam. That distinction between literal history and cultural truth is what makes the Hùng Kings so fascinating. If you would like to explore more stories from this legendary age, you can find the tales of Saint Gióng, chưng, and Dai, the watermelon, and many others here on the channel. And if you enjoy discovering the myths, folktales, and literature of Vietnam, consider subscribing to the Rice Field Archive. Thank you for listening.